James had always prized his privacy. After years of scraping and saving, he finally built the warehouse on his property, a fortress of steel and concrete where he stored his classic car collection, tools, and prized possessions. It was his sanctuary, in the quiet suburban neighborhood, nestled within the strict HOA that promised order and respect. But that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky a fiery orange, something felt off. James pulled up to his warehouse after a long day at work, the familiar hum of cicadas filling the warm air. He slowed his car, but then froze. Massive trucks, 3 of them, were parked right inside his warehouse, their towering frames blocked. The entrance. Engines silent, but menacing under the flickering streetlights. The trucks bore the unmistakable logo of Karen's Landscaping Company, bright green letters spelling out Karen's Lawn and Logistics. She wasn't supposed to have access. No one was. James's heart pounded in disbelief. How had she gotten in? The warehouse doors were locked, the alarm system armed. Yet here they were, her trucks, boldly occupying his private space, like squatters on a king's land. He stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. His eyes scanned the area for any sign of Karen. But the street was empty. The neighborhood's calm facade now felt like a mask, hiding something rotten beneath. His phone buzzed, a text from his wife. "Did you get those trucks out yet? They're blocking my way too." James hadn't told her yet. He felt a cold, knot tightening in his stomach. He tried calling Karen, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Frustration mounted as he paced back and forth, his mind racing with questions. This wasn't just a harmless prank or an accident. It felt deliberate. A silent declaration of war. The calm that had defined his neighborhood shattered in that moment. From a distance, a shadow moved, a figure lurking behind a hedge. James squinted. Was it Karen? Or someone else watching him? He felt eyes on him. The eerie sensation that his every move was being tracked. As night fully settled, the warehouse lights flickered and then went dark, plunging the scene into near-complete blackness. James's breath hitched. He pulled out his keys and tried the lock on the side door. No response. The trucks blocked his main entrance, and the alarm system was mysteriously offline. Panic threatened to rise, but he forced calm. He had to find answers. Was this just a neighborhood dispute gone wrong, or something more sinister? Suddenly, a car pulled up quietly across the street, a familiar vehicle. James's neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, stepped out, her face lined with worry. "They're causing trouble again," she whispered. "Karen's been pushing boundaries for months now. Nobody knows how she keeps getting away with it." James swallowed hard. This wasn't a one-off event. It was a growing storm, and he was standing right in its eye. Determined, James pulled out his phone and dialed the HOA president, hoping to find support. But the call went unanswered. The trucks sat there, cold and unmoving, like giant sentinels of defiance, daring James to make a move. And deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, James woke with a restless mind and a tight knot in his chest. The trucks were still there, parked defiantly in his warehouse. Every glance out the window felt like a challenge. He needed answers, and he needed to confront Karen face to face. Grabbing his keys and a folder of HOA documents he'd pulled up the night before, James made his way to Karen's house. Her lawn was immaculate, freshly mowed, but there was no sign of her. He rang the doorbell. No answer. He tried the back gate and found it unlocked. Another small violation, but not the main issue. He called out her name, frustration creeping into his voice. "Karen, we need to talk about the trucks in my warehouse." Suddenly, the door swung open. Karen stood there, arms crossed, a smug smile playing on her lips. Her eyes gleamed with that familiar mix of entitlement and defiance. "Oh, James," she said, voice dripping with false sweetness. "I was wondering when you'd come by." James took a deep breath. "You have no right to park your trucks in my warehouse. It's my property, private, off limits to everyone but me." Karen laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. "Private? That's where you're wrong. The HOA rules say the warehouse falls under shared property. It's within the community boundaries, which means it's available for all residents to use." James's blood ran cold. Shared property? That's ridiculous. The warehouse is clearly on my land. With my deed and permits, it's not a common area. Karen shrugged. "You might want to read the fine print. The HOA documents are vague, and frankly, I've got friends on the board who are looking out for what's best for the community." She gave him a knowing smile, as if to say, "You can't win." James's jaw clenched. "You're trespassing. You're damaging my property. This isn't just about trucks. You're breaking the rules." Karen's eyes narrowed. "The rules are flexible when it benefits the neighborhood, and frankly, your attitude is what's causing division. We're all supposed to share and cooperate." James shook his head in disbelief. "This isn't sharing, Karen. This is stealing, and I'm not going to let it slide." From somewhere behind her, a voice interrupted. A neighbor stepping onto the porch. "Karen's right, James. I've seen her park trucks in the warehouse before, and no one's done anything about it. Maybe it's time we rethink what private really means." James turned to see Mr. Porter, an older man with a calm but firm expression. His words sent a chill down James's spine. If even longtime neighbors questioned the ownership, this was going to get messier than he imagined. Karen's smile grew wider, sensing victory. "See? The community supports me. You're fighting a losing battle." James wanted to argue, but a gnawing doubt crept in. Was the warehouse really his to control entirely? Could there be a loophole? His mind raced, realizing the problem wasn't just Karen. It was the whole HOA structure that seemed to be shifting beneath his feet. Before he could respond, Karen added, "If you want to challenge this, bring it to the HOA board. But trust me, they won't side with you." James's stomach twisted. The one place he thought he could find justice might be compromised. As Karen turned and went inside, James felt a new determination harden within him. If the HOA was playing dirty, he would dig deeper into every rule, every document, every shadow hiding in this community. But first, he had to figure out who on the board was backing Karen, and why. The peaceful neighborhood James had known was dissolving into a battlefield, and he was right in the center of it. James sat at his kitchen table, the morning sunlight filtering weakly through the blinds. His hands trembled slightly as he stared at the stack of HOA documents spread before him. The warehouse dispute was bigger than he had imagined. If Karen had allies on the HOA board, then this wasn't just a simple property fight. It was a power struggle, disguised as community cooperation. He dialed the HOA president's number again. The line rang, then clicked to voicemail. "Please leave a message." James swallowed his frustration and left a clear, firm message, outlining the illegal parking and demanding immediate intervention. Hours passed with no response. Frustration mounting. James attended the monthly HOA meeting that evening, hoping for answers, or at least some support. The community center was packed, but the mood was unusually tense. James spotted Karen sitting near the front, chatting animatedly with a few other homeowners who nodded along. The board members sat stoically, faces unreadable. When it was James's turn to speak, he rose, heart pounding. I'm here because Karen illegally parks her trucks in my private warehouse. This is trespassing and damaging property. I ask the board to enforce the rules and protect my rights as a homeowner." Murmurs rippled through the room. Karen's supporters exchanged glances. The HOA president, Mr. Graves, cleared his throat. "Mr. James, we appreciate your concerns, but this is a complicated matter. The property lines and HOA boundaries can be ambiguous, and we must consider the interests of the entire community." James frowned. "Ambiguous? The warehouse is clearly on my deeded property. It's not a community area." Another board member, Ms. Franklin, spoke up, voice calm but firm. "The documents do leave some room for interpretation. We're reviewing the issue carefully. We ask for patience while we investigate." James felt the sting of dismissal. Karen smiled subtly, whispering to her neighbors. It was clear. The board was dragging its feet. After the meeting, James stayed behind, trying to talk to Mr. Graves. The president was cordial, but evasive. "We're trying to maintain peace in the neighborhood. Sometimes compromise is necessary." James's jaw tightened. Was the board protecting Karen? Or was there something else at play? Determined to find out, James began paying closer attention to the board members' behavior. He noticed late-night conversations in hushed tones, cars arriving, and leaving the community center after hours. There were whispered phone calls he could overhear while walking his dog. One evening, while returning from a walk, James spotted a small group huddled near the boardroom windows, faces tense. When he approached, they scattered like shadows, leaving behind a discarded envelope. Curiosity overtaking caution, James picked it up. Inside was a memo outlining a secret vote to reinterpret property boundaries that would effectively transfer some private parcels, including his warehouse, into HOA control. His heart pounded. This wasn't just inaction. It was a deliberate move to take over. Who was behind this? Karen surely, but also powerful figures on the board. James felt the weight of isolation. The very people entrusted to protect the community were conspiring against him. That night, sleep eluded him. The warehouse was no longer just his sanctuary. It was a battleground, and the enemy wasn't just Karen. It was the entire system protecting her. But James wasn't ready to surrender. He resolved to expose the truth, document every move, and rally any neighbor who valued fairness. Because if he lost this fight, it wasn't just a warehouse at stake. It was the principle of ownership, privacy, and trust. The moon hung low and heavy in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the quiet neighborhood. While most residents were deep in sleep, James was wide awake, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. If the HOA board was conspiring to rewrite property, boundaries, and quietly steal his warehouse, he couldn't wait for another meeting or hollow promise. He needed hard evidence. Clad in dark clothes, James slipped out of his house and made his way toward the community center. The building loomed ahead, shuttered for the night, but the faint glow of street lamps and security cameras reminded him this wasn't going to be easy. James pulled a small flashlight from his jacket pocket and glanced around nervously. No cars in sight. His pulse quickened as he approached the back entrance. An old metal door, secured by an electronic lock. He'd done his research. The code was the HOA's founding year, something the board always bragged about in newsletters. The lock clicked open with a quiet beep. Inside, the stale air smelled of dust and forgotten paperwork. James moved quickly but cautiously, navigating the dim hallway toward the archives room. This was where the HOA kept old records, maps, and meeting minutes, documents that could reveal the truth. As he slid open the heavy filing cabinet, he heard a faint creak behind him. His breath caught. Was someone else here? He froze, listening. Silence. Probably just a branch outside. He shoved the cabinet drawers open and rifled through folders marked with years and dates, the minutes from meetings. Past property deeds, amendments, and legal notices spilled onto the dusty floor. His hands trembled as he scanned line after line, looking for anything related to the warehouse or property boundaries. Then, tucked between yellowed pages, he found it, a small amendment from 5 years ago. The text was clear, a secret agreement to allow limited community access to certain storage structures in the neighborhood, including his warehouse. But the clause was vague, and the amendment was never officially ratified by the full board. James snapped pictures with his phone, heart racing. This could be the smoking gun. Suddenly footsteps echoed down the hallway. His pulse hammered in his ears. Someone was coming. James shoved the documents back, barely managing to slide the cabinet closed. He ducked behind a large metal shelf, just. As the door creaked open, a tall figure stepped inside, flashlight in hand, scanning the room. James held his breath. Pressing against the cold steel, the intruder muttered softly. "What's going on here?" The footsteps moved closer. James's mind raced. Should he reveal himself or stay hidden? He stayed silent, heart pounding. The figure flicked the light near the cabinet, then, mercifully, moved on. Once the door slammed shut, James waited a full minute before sneaking out the way he came, clutching the photos tightly. Outside, the night air was cool against his sweaty skin. He glanced back at the dark building, now a fortress of secrets and lies. This wasn't just about trucks anymore. It was a cover-up. James knew he needed allies. The fight wasn't just his. It was for the whole community. But who could he trust? Back home, he spread out the pictures and notes, piecing together the puzzle. The amendment was the key to Karen's claim, but its unofficial status meant it could be challenged. He also noticed something else. Handwritten notes on the margin. Initials that matched some board members he'd seen at meetings. There was more collusion than he'd imagined. James sat back, exhaustion pressing down on him. The warehouse invasion was no accident. It was part of a well-planned scheme. But he had one advantage, knowledge. And with knowledge, he would fight back. The community center buzzed with low murmurs as neighbors filled the room for the special HOA meeting. James sat near the front, clutching a folder thick with copies of the amendment. His phone loaded with photos from his midnight raid. The stakes had never been higher. This was more than a neighborhood dispute. It was a battle for his property, his dignity, and the fragile trust in their community. Karen entered last, her confident smile like a challenge thrown in James's face. She was flanked by a small group of supporters, their whispers and nods fueling her boldness. The HOA board members took their seats, faces a mix of calm and calculation. Mr. Graves, the HOA president, tapped the microphone. "Let's begin. We're here to discuss the property boundaries and the alleged parking violations concerning the warehouse." James stood, voice steady but fierce. "The trucks parked in my warehouse are illegal trespassers on my private property. I have here the original deed, and I've found that the so-called amendment Karen claims was never ratified. It's a sham used to justify stealing from me." Karen's supporters hissed and muttered, but she raised a hand to silence them. "I'm not stealing anything," she said. "The amendment might not have been ratified, but the community has been using that warehouse as shared space for years. We have the right to access." James shook his head. "You and your allies on the board have been rewriting the rules behind closed doors. That secret vote I found is proof you're conspiring to seize control. Not for the community's benefit, but your own. Karen's eyes narrowed. If that's what you think, prove it. Suddenly, Karen pulled out a thick folder of her own. A contract dated just last month, signed by several board members and a lawyer. This contract overrides any previous claims. It grants community access to the warehouse, effective immediately. Gasps rippled through the room. James felt a cold wave wash over him. How did you get this? He demanded. Karen's smile was cruel. I have my ways. The board agreed this was the best course for everyone. You're resisting change, James. But change is coming. The room erupted in arguments. Some neighbors sided with Karen, tired of disputes and eager to share resources. Others backed James, outraged by the deception and manipulation. Mr. Graves tried to restore order. We need a vote. Before the tally could begin, a voice cut through the chaos. A neighbor James hadn't seen before. A quiet woman in the back. She stepped forward, holding a folder thick with documents. I have something to share, she said, eyes fixed on Karen. Proof that Karen has been parking trucks illegally, not just in James's warehouse, but other private properties around the neighborhood without permission. The room fell silent. The woman handed copies to the board and James. The documents included photos, complaints, and even invoices showing Karen's company using private spaces without approval. Karen's supporters looked shocked, some whispering anxiously. The woman continued, "This isn't about community sharing. It's about Karen using the HOA and the board to benefit her business illegally." Karen's face flushed with rage. "Lies! Fabrications! You're all against me because you're scared of progress." James saw the tide turning. The woman's evidence was damning, and the community's mood shifted. Mr. Graves cleared his throat. "Given this new information, we must postpone the vote and conduct a thorough investigation." Karen's supporters grumbled, but the board's decision was final. James sat down, heart pounding. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, he felt hope. The truth was out in the open. Outside, as the meeting broke up, James noticed Karen storming off, her expression dark and determined. He knew she wouldn't give up. Not now, not ever. The morning after the explosive HOA meeting, James barely slept. His mind churned with everything that had happened. The secret amendment, the forged contract, Karen's brazen defiance, and the new witness who had turned the tide. Yet beneath the relief, a gnawing worry lingered. Karen wasn't defeated. She was dangerous, and she had allies. Just as he was about to leave for work, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the corner cafe at noon. I have information you need." A friend. James hesitated, then nodded. To himself, he had no choice but to follow the lead. At the cafe, he spotted a woman in her early 40s, sitting alone at a small table by the window. She had sharp eyes and an air of quiet strength. "You must be James," she said, standing to shake his hand. "I'm Laura. I used to be on the HOA board." James's eyebrows shot up. "Used to be? Why did you leave?" Laura's gaze darkened. "Because I couldn't stomach the corruption anymore." Karen's influence is deeper than you think. She's been pushing for control for years, manipulating votes and intimidating neighbors. James leaned in. "I need proof. Something solid." Laura slid a thick envelope across the table. "Here, emails, financial records, even text messages between Karen and some board members. They're coordinating to privatize community spaces under the guise of shared property. Your warehouse is just the beginning." James flipped through the papers, heart pounding. The evidence was damning. "But why help me?" he asked. Laura's eyes softened. "Because this neighborhood deserves better. Because I believe in fairness. And because Karen has made enemies of us all." Quietly. Just then, Laura's phone buzzed. She glanced down and stiffened. "They're watching me," she whispered. "You need to be careful, James. Karen doesn't play fair." A shadow passed by the cafe window. James spotted a car slowly cruising past, the driver's face obscured, behind dark sunglasses. Suddenly, the weight of the battle felt heavier. This was no longer a neighborhood squabble. It was a war. As James and Laura parted ways, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, but also the creeping fear of what might come next. He wasn't just fighting for his warehouse anymore. He was fighting for the truth and for his home. The days that followed Laura's revelation felt like walking through a fog for James. Every phone call, every knock at the door, sent his nerves into overdrive. Karen's shadow loomed larger than ever, and the evidence he now held made him a target. He stopped answering unknown numbers and avoided the community center whenever possible. But the HOA meetings kept coming. Endless tense gatherings, where Karen's supporters pushed back harder than ever, spinning lies and stirring division. One evening, as James returned home from work, he noticed a black SUV parked suspiciously near his driveway. The engine was off, but the dark-tinted windows made it impossible to see inside. His heart pounded. He hurried inside and locked the door behind him. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. That night, his phone buzzed again. A text flashed on the screen. "Drop the fight, James. This isn't worth it. Think about your family. No signature." James's hands shook. Threats were new territory, but he refused to be intimidated. The next morning, he met with Laura again, hoping to plan their next move. They agreed to approach a local journalist who had a reputation for exposing corruption. But before the meeting could happen, James's email was hacked, and files he'd compiled were deleted or corrupted. It was a calculated blow, designed to silence him. Undeterred, James backed up all evidence in multiple secure locations. He even confided in a few trusted neighbors who had expressed quiet support. One of them, Mrs. Rodriguez, a retired lawyer, offered to help him prepare for a legal battle. Meanwhile, Karen's tactics escalated. Rumors spread about James being a troublemaker, stirring unrest, even accusations that his warehouse had code violations. The community was fracturing, trust eroding fast, but James refused to back down. The warehouse symbolized more than property rights. It was about standing up against corruption and abuse. As tensions peaked, an emergency HOA meeting was called. Rumors circulated that Karen would push for an immediate vote to finalize the takeover of the warehouse. James arrived early, prepared to fight with everything he had. When Karen entered, her smile was cold, almost victorious. As the vote was about to begin, James stood and requested the floor. "I have new evidence," he announced, heart pounding. Emails and documents proving illegal coordination between Karen and several board members. This isn't just about a warehouse. It's a conspiracy to seize control and silence opposition. Gasps filled the room. Karen's face paled slightly, but she masked it quickly. Mr. Graves, the HOA president, looked conflicted, but nodded. "We will review this evidence carefully. For now, the vote is postponed." The room erupted in whispers. James felt a spark of hope. The fight was far from over, but the truth was finally piercing the darkness. Outside, the tension crackled like electricity. Karen's eyes met James's briefly, a silent promise that the battle was only just beginning. The sun rose over the neighborhood, casting long shadows over the quiet streets. Today was the decisive day. The HOA board would meet once more to finally settle the fate of James's warehouse and the integrity of the entire community. James stood outside the community center, the folder of evidence secure in his bag, but heavier than ever with the weight of months of conflict. His phone buzzed with texts from neighbors pledging support. For the first time, he realized he wasn't alone. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The room was packed. Board members took their seats, and Karen arrived with her usual confident stride. But today, there was an edge of uncertainty in her eyes. Mr. Graves opened the meeting. We have before us serious allegations of misconduct by members of this board, including Ms. Karen's involvement in unauthorized use of private property. Karen's expression hardened. This is a witch hunt. Baseless accusations fueled by a vendetta. James raised his hand, voice steady but firm. The evidence shows otherwise. This is not just about my warehouse. It's about trust, fairness, and respecting our community's rules. One by one, James presented emails, contracts, and financial records that clearly implicated Karen and several board members in a scheme to exploit shared property claims to benefit Karen's business. Whispers turned into murmurs, and murmurs into stunned silence. Suddenly, Laura stood up. I have one more piece to share. She held up a USB drive. This contains audio recordings of private conversations between Karen and board members discussing their plans to pressure and intimidate homeowners like James. Karen's face turned ashen. The room gasped as the recordings played over the speakers, voices plotting, mocking, and confirming their manipulation. The HOA president cleared his throat, voice heavy. Due to the gravity of these findings, an immediate vote will be held to remove the implicated board members and nullify any contracts related to the disputed warehouse. Karen glared at James, but she knew the tide had turned. The vote was unanimous. Karen's supporters sat in stunned silence, defeated. As the meeting adjourned, neighbors approached James, expressing gratitude and newfound unity. The warehouse was his, unquestionably. But then came the twist. As James packed his things, a quiet voice spoke beside him. James, there's something you should see. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, the retired lawyer. She handed him a sealed envelope, marked confidential. Inside was a letter from the HOA's legal counsel, revealing that while Karen and several board members had been corrupt, another hidden faction within the HOA had been manipulating events from the shadows, using the warehouse dispute as a distraction to cover a much larger plan involving community land sales to outside developers. James's heart sank. The fight wasn't over. The warehouse victory was just the beginning. Outside the community center, James looked out over the neighborhood with new resolve. The battle for his home, his community, and its future was far from finished. But now, he had truth on his side, and that was a powerful weapon.